They buried him at midnight in the grove where no one would think to look. The Alpha King's firstborn son, heir to the throne of Valdoria, lowered into the cold earth while his heart still beat. His own brother had ordered it done. His own blood had shoveled dirt over his face while he lay paralyzed, unable to scream, unable to fight, able only to feel each clump of soil stealing his air. By morning, the prince would be nothing but a corpse, and the throne would pass to the one who deserved it least. But they hadn't counted on her. Vesna was a rejected Omega, cast out by her pack for a shame she couldn't speak of, surviving on the edges of the forest where decent wolves never ventured. She had nothing. No status, no protection, no future. She was the kind of wolf that others pretended not to see. So when she stumbled upon the freshly turned earth, when she pressed her ear to the ground and heard the faintest scratching beneath, no one was watching. No one saw her fall to her knees. No one witnessed her tear into the soil with her bare hands until her fingers bled and her nails cracked and her lungs burned from effort. No one saw her drag the prince from his grave. And no one could have predicted what would happen next. Because the moment Vesna breathed life back into Soren's frozen lungs, something ancient stirred between them. A bond that shouldn't exist, a connection that defied every law of their kind. She had saved the Alpha King's son. In return, he would offer her protection, shelter, everything she'd lost. But only under one condition. He would never let himself care for her. Neither of them understood how impossible that vow would become. The forest had a way of swallowing the unwanted. Vesna had learned this truth 3 moons ago, when her father had dragged her to the boundary stones and thrown her across them like refuse. She remembered his face, twisted with disgust, remembered her sister Cressida watching from the doorway with cold satisfaction. Most of all, she remembered the silence of her pack. Dozens of wolves who had known her since birth, and not a single voice raised in her defense. Rejected, cast out, erased. The word followed her like a shadow, branded deeper than any physical mark. In the hierarchy of wolves, rejected Omegas ranked below servants, below prisoners, below the dirt beneath one's claws. They were considered cursed, contaminated. Most didn't survive their first winter alone. Vesna had survived 3 moons. But survival and living were not the same thing. Tonight, she moved through the trees on silent feet, her threadbare cloak pulled tight against the autumn chill. She was hunting for mushrooms, for roots, for anything that might quiet the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. The Forbidden Grove was dangerous territory, too close to the palace grounds, but desperation had long since killed her caution. That's when she smelled it. Blood. Fresh and metallic, cutting through the damp forest air. And beneath it, something else, something that made her wolf stir with sudden alertness. An alpha scent, powerful and rich, but wrong somehow. Fading, dying. Vesna should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to avoid whatever violence had occurred here. Rejected Omegas who stumbled into pack business didn't live to tell the tale, but her feet carried her forward. The clearing opened before her, moonlight spilling across churned earth. Someone had been digging here. Recently. The soil was loose and dark, piled in careless mounds around a shallow depression. And there, near the base of an ancient oak, she saw it. A hand. Pale fingers barely visible above the dirt, twitching with the faintest movement. Vesna's heart stopped. Then it exploded into frantic rhythm. She ran to the spot, dropping to her knees, her hands already clawing at the earth. The soil was packed tighter than it looked, and her fingers screamed in protest as she tore at it. Dirt wedged beneath her nails, cracking them. Her palms scraped against stones. She didn't care. Someone was buried here. Someone still alive. She dug until her shoulders burned. She dug until her fingers left bloody streaks across the earth. She dug until she uncovered a face. A man's face. Young, maybe 25 summers, with sharp features and dark hair matted with soil and blood. His eyes were closed, his lips blue. But when Vesna pressed her hand to his chest, she felt it. A heartbeat. Faint. Stuttering. But there. She brushed the remaining dirt from his nose and mouth, tilting his head back to clear his airway. His chest rose slightly, fell, rose again. He was breathing. Barely. But he wouldn't last long. Whoever had buried him had known what they were doing. The soil had been packed to suffocate slowly, to ensure he felt every moment of his death. Vesna grabbed his shoulders and pulled. He was heavy, far heavier than she expected. Pure muscle and alpha bulk that her omega frame strained to move. But she hooked her arms beneath his and dragged him inch by inch from the grave, grunting with effort, her boots slipping in the loose earth. When she finally hauled him free, she collapsed beside him, gasping. That's when the moonlight caught his face properly. That's when she saw the sigil embroidered on his torn shirt, the silver threading that no common wolf would ever wear. The royal crest of Valdoria. Vesna's blood turned to ice. She knew this face. Everyone in the kingdom knew this face. Prince Sorin, firstborn son of Alpha King Kalin, heir to the throne. The prince who had been announced dead 3 days ago. Dead from a hunting accident, the palace had claimed. A tragic fall, a broken neck, a kingdom in mourning. But here he was, very much alive, buried in a shallow grave in the Forbidden Grove. Someone had tried to murder him. Someone had lied about his death. And now Vesna, a rejected Omega with no status and no protection, was kneeling over his unconscious body. If anyone found her here, they would kill her. No questions asked. An Omega alone with the missing prince? She would be blamed for whatever had happened to him. She needed to leave. Now, before anyone came. Vesna was halfway to her feet when his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak but desperate. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, glazed with pain and oxygen deprivation. But they found her face and held. "Don't," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't leave me." And then she heard it. Footsteps. Multiple sets, crashing through the forest toward the clearing, torchlight flickering between the distant trees. They were coming back. Whoever had buried him was returning to make sure the job was done. Vesna didn't think. She acted. Her hands found the prince's arms and she pulled, dragging him toward the thick underbrush at the edge of the clearing. He tried to help, his legs pushing weakly against the ground, but he was too far gone for real movement. Dead weight that her small frame shouldn't have been able to shift. Somehow, she managed. They tumbled into a dense thicket of brambles just as the torchlight broke into the clearing. Vesna clamped her hand over the prince's mouth, pressing her body against his to shield them both from view. Through the gaps in the thorny branches she watched. 3 men. Warriors, judging by their build and the swords at their hips. They wore dark clothing with no insignia, their faces hidden by hoods. One of them carried a shovel. They stopped at the empty grave. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the largest one cursed viciously. "He's gone." His voice was deep, rough with disbelief. "The dirt's been disturbed. Someone dug him out." "That's impossible," another hissed. "No one comes here. No one knew." Clearly someone did. The large man kicked at the scattered soil. "Spread out, find him. If he reaches the palace, if he tells anyone." "The kingdom still thinks he's dead," the third interrupted. "Even if he surfaces, who would believe him? Prince Corvus has already been named heir. The Alpha King has already mourned. Prince Corvus." The name hit Vesna like a blow to the chest. The prince's own brother had done this. His own blood had buried him alive. Beside her, Sorin had gone rigid. His eyes were open now, clear with a terrible understanding. He'd heard everything. "Find him anyway," the large man ordered. "Dead this time. No mistakes." The men spread into the forest, their torches casting dancing shadows through the trees. Vesna held her breath until her lungs screamed. The prince didn't move, didn't blink, and just stared at the spot where the men had stood with an expression that made something twist in her chest. Betrayal, raw and bottomless. She knew that look. She'd worn it herself. They waited until the torchlight faded completely, until the footsteps grew distant and eventually disappeared. Only then did Vesna release her grip on his mouth. "Can you stand?" she whispered. Soren attempted to rise. He made it halfway before his legs buckled, his body pitching forward. Vesna caught him, staggering under his weight, her arms wrapping around his torso to steady him. "Easy," she murmured, slowly. His scent washed over her, even weakened as it was, alpha through and through. Dominance and power, and something underneath that reminded her of winter pine. It should have frightened her. Alphas were dangerous, especially to unmated omegas, but right now, this alpha was barely conscious, leaning on her like she was the only solid thing in his world. "My brother," he rasped. "Corvus did this." "I heard." A bitter laugh scraped from his throat. "He always wanted the throne. I just never thought—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "I can't go back. If I return to the palace, he'll finish what he started. He has our father's ear. He has the guard's loyalty." "Then where?" Vesna asked. "I don't know." His weight shifted against her, and she felt the tremor running through his muscles. Exhaustion, blood loss, the lingering effects of whatever they'd used to paralyze him. "I don't know anything anymore." Vesna should have left him there, should have pointed him toward the nearest village and disappeared back into the forest where she belonged. This wasn't her fight. These weren't her enemies. But she remembered the hand reaching from the grave, the desperate grip on her wrist. "Don't leave me. I know a place," she heard herself say. "Abandoned. Safe. At least until you recover." His eyes found hers in the darkness, even weak, even shattered. There was something sharp in that gaze, something that assessed and measured. "Why would you help me?" he asked quietly. "You're a rejected Omega. I can smell it on you. Helping me gains you nothing." "Maybe I know what it feels like," Vesna said, "to be buried by the people who should have protected you." Recognition passed across his face. "If you help me," he said slowly, "if you help me survive this and expose what Corvus has done, I'll restore everything you've lost. Status, pack, protection. I'll make them acknowledge you again. And if you die anyway, then at least you'll have tried." His grip tightened on her arm, steadying himself. "But hear me clearly, Omega. I trust no one now. Not after this. I'll accept your help, but don't expect gratitude. Don't expect kindness. My brother taught me what trust earns you." "I don't need your kindness," Vesna replied. "I just need you to not die." She shifted his weight against her shoulder and began walking, guiding them deeper into the forest. They'd gone perhaps 100 paces when he suddenly stopped. "Wait." His nostrils flared, his weakened senses still sharper than any Omega's. He was scenting her, reading her. "There's something else. Something you're hiding." His eyes narrowed, suspicion cutting through the exhaustion. "What are you?" Vesna's heart stuttered. She kept moving, forcing him to stumble along beside her, hoping the exertion might distract him from his question. It didn't work. "I smell it on you," Soren pressed, his voice harder now despite his weakness. "Something beneath the Omega scent. Something that doesn't belong." "You're delirious," Vesna said flatly. "You were just buried alive. Your senses are confused." "My senses are never confused." They reached a stream, and Vesna used it as an excuse to stop, lowering him against a fallen log. She cupped water in her hands and brought it to his cracked lips. He drank greedily, his eyes never leaving her face. "You saved my life," he said when he'd finished. "I'm not ungrateful for that, whatever I said before. But I need to know who I'm trusting. What I'm trusting. Vesna sat back on her heels, weighing her options. She could lie, could spin some tale about rare Omega bloodlines or unusual heritage, but something in his gaze told her he would see through it. And perhaps, just this once, she was tired of hiding. I have a gift, she said quietly. Or a curse, depending on who you ask. Soren waited. When I touch someone who's injured, I can heal them. She held up her hands, studying her own bloodied fingers. The wounds transfer to me, their pain becomes mine, their damage marks my body instead of theirs. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the babbling of the stream. That's why they rejected you, Soren said finally. Your pack. My father called it demon magic. Said I was contaminated at birth, that my mother had lain with something unnatural. Vesna's voice stayed flat, emotionless. She'd learned long ago that feeling these memories only made them worse. When I was young, I healed a pup who'd been trampled by horses. Everyone saw. After that, they looked at me differently. And when my father needed an excuse to cast me out, he used your gift against you. He used everything against me. Soren studied her for a long moment. In the moonlight, his features looked carved from pale stone, beautiful and cold. The kind of face that belonged on statues, on coins, on the portraits that hung in great halls. Not here in the mud beside a rejected Omega. Show me, he said. Vesna blinked. What? I'm injured. He gestured to his torso, where his torn shirt revealed dark bruising across his ribs. Heal me. Show me this gift of yours. You don't understand. The damage becomes mine. If I heal you fully, I'll take your wounds. All of them. Then heal me partially. His gaze was steady, testing. Prove you are what you claim. This was a mistake. She knew it was a mistake. But he was watching her with that sharp assessment, deciding whether she was asset or threat, and Vesna understood that this moment would determine everything that followed. She reached toward him slowly. Her fingers found his side, pressing gently against the bruised ribs. She closed her eyes and breathed in deeply, reaching for that strange warmth that lived somewhere beneath her heartbeat. It rose to meet her touch, flowing down her arm like liquid heat. Soren gasped. She felt his pain enter her, felt the sharp ache of cracked bone bloom across her own ribs. Not everything, she pulled back before the transfer completed, but enough. Enough to prove. When she opened her eyes, Soren was staring at her with something that might have been wonder. He lifted his shirt. The bruising had faded from black to yellow, the swelling visibly reduced. Then his gaze dropped to where Vesna clutched her own side, where fresh bruising was spreading beneath her thin dress. You weren't lying, he breathed. I don't lie. Vesna lowered her hand, pushing past the pain. It would fade with time. It always did. I just don't tell the truth unless I have to. The cold suspicion in his expression didn't disappear entirely, but it softened at the edges, made room for something else. You could have healed me fully in the grove, he said slowly. When you first found me, why didn't you? Because fully healing you would have likely killed me. And I didn't survive 3 moons in this forest just to die for a stranger, even a prince. The ghost of a smile crossed his face, gone as quickly as it appeared, but real. Fair enough. They pressed on, Vesna guiding them toward the abandoned mill she'd been using as shelter. It was another hour's walk, and by the time they reached it, Soren was leaning heavily on her, his breath coming in ragged gasps. She settled him near the cold hearth, wrapping her single blanket around his shoulders. He was shivering despite the alpha heat that should have warmed him. Whatever drug they'd used to paralyze him was still working through his system. Rest, she told him. I'll keep watch. His eyes were already closing, exhaustion finally claiming him. But before he drifted off, his hand found hers in the darkness. Vesna, her name in his voice rough and low. Thank you. 2 words. Simple. but no one had thanked her for anything in 3 moons, perhaps longer. She didn't trust herself to respond, so she simply sat beside him, watching the moonlight creep across the dusty floor, her bruised ribs aching with borrowed pain. She must have dozed, because when the door crashed open, she was too slow to react. A figure stood silhouetted in the entrance. Female, tall and coldly beautiful, with dark hair and eyes that found Vesna immediately in the shadows. Cressida, her sister. "There you are." Cressida's voice dripped with satisfaction. "I knew if I followed the blood trail long enough, I'd find you playing savior to something pathetic." Vesna scrambled to her feet, placing herself between her sister and the sleeping prince. "How did you really think Father wouldn't have people watching the border?" Cressida stepped inside, her gaze moving past Vesna to the figure wrapped in blankets. Her eyes widened with recognition. Oh, this is interesting. The missing prince. The one everyone thinks is dead." A cruel smile curved her lips. "Do you know there's a reward for information about unusual sightings near the palace? Prince Corvus is very concerned about rumors." "Cressida, don't." "Don't what?" "Don't tell them where to find him." Her sister laughed, soft and vicious. "You think he'll protect you, sister? You think this changes anything?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried perfectly in the small space. "When he finds out what you really are, when he discovers the full truth about that night, he'll kill you himself." Behind her, Vesna heard Soren stir, and she knew, with sinking certainty, that he'd heard every word. Soren was on his feet before Vesna could react. Despite his weakness, despite the trembling in his limbs, he moved with predatory grace, positioning himself beside her rather than behind, not hiding, standing. "Leave," he said to Cressida. His voice carried the unmistakable weight of alpha command. Even diminished, even half dead, the authority in it made Cressida's smirk falter. "Your Highness." She dipped into a mocking curtsy. "I didn't realize the dead could give orders." "I'm clearly not dead." Soren took a step forward, and Vesna saw what the movement cost him, the tightening around his eyes, the slight hitch in his breath. "Which means, the story your new prince has been telling is a lie. Would you like to be part of that lie when the truth emerges?" Cressida's eyes darted between them, calculating. "The truth is, whatever Prince Corvus says it is. He controls the palace now. The guard answers to him. Your father barely leaves his chamber since your supposed death." "My father is alive?" "Alive but broken." Cressida's smile returned, cruel and knowing. "Funny how grief can destroy an alpha. They say he hasn't spoken in days. Corvus handles all royal matters in his stead." Vesna watched Soren's jaw clench. His father thought him dead, was mourning him, while his brother sat on his throne and consolidated power. "Tell anyone you saw us," Soren said quietly, "and I promise you this. When I reclaim what's mine, and I will reclaim it, your family will answer for every word you spoke against me." Threats from a dead man. But Cressida's voice had lost its confidence. She was reassessing, recalculating the odds. "Perhaps I'll keep your secret for now. Perhaps I'll simply watch and see which way the wind blows." "Do that." Cressida's gaze shifted to Vesna, and something ugly flickered there. "Don't think I've forgotten about you, sister. Or about what you did. The prince may not know yet, but he will. And when he does, enough." Soren's command cracked through the air like a whip. "Leave. Now." For a moment, Cressida seemed ready to argue, then self-preservation won. She retreated through the doorway, her footsteps fading into the pre-dawn darkness. Silence fell over the mill. Vesna stood frozen, waiting for the questions, waiting for Soren to turn on her, to demand answers about the night Cressida had mentioned, about the truth she was hiding. He had every right, every reason to distrust her now. Instead, he swayed on his feet. She caught him before he fell, guiding him back to the blankets, her hands steadier than they should have been. He was burning with fever now, his skin hot beneath her palms. The paralytic was wearing off, but something else was taking hold. "You need to rest," she said. "I need answers." But his eyes were already closing, exhaustion dragging him under. "What did she mean? What did you do?" Vesna's throat tightened. "It's a long story. We appear to have time. You appear to have a fever. The story can wait until you're not dying." A sound escaped him that might have been a laugh. "Practical. I appreciate practical." She settled beside him, checking his pulse, his temperature. The fever worried her. It felt unnatural, too intense for simple exhaustion. Something was wrong beyond the obvious. "Your sister hates you," Soren murmured, half-conscious. "Yes. Why?" Vesna considered the question. The easy answer was jealousy, resentment, their father's favoritism. But the truth was more complicated. The truth always was. "Because I remind her of things she'd rather forget," she said finally, "and because hating me is easier than hating herself." Soren's eyes opened slightly, focusing on her with surprising clarity. "That sounds familiar." "Brothers and sisters," Vesna said quietly. "We wound each other deepest." "Yes." He reached out, and for a moment she thought he would touch her face. Instead, his fingers found her hand, closing around it with weak pressure. "Thank you. For not running when she came. For standing between us. You were unconscious. Someone had to. You could have let her take me, collected the reward yourself." "I don't want rewards." "Then what do you want, Vesna?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in longer than she could remember. What did she want? Safety? Acceptance? To stop running? Stop hiding? Stop being the thing that everyone feared? "I want to matter," she said before she could stop herself. "To someone. Anyone. I want to exist in a way that isn't just surviving until tomorrow." Soren was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "You matter to me. Right now, in this moment, you are the only person in this kingdom who matters." The words shouldn't have affected her. They were born of fever and desperation, the gratitude of a man who had no one else. They meant nothing. But her pulse jumped anyway. She stayed beside him as he slept, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering why his hand in hers felt like something she'd been missing her entire life. Dawn was breaking when she heard them. Horses, multiple riders, moving fast through the forest, and voices calling to each other with the discipline of trained hunters, Corvus's men. They were searching. They moved through the forest like ghosts. Vesna led them along paths she'd mapped during her months of exile, deer trails and dried streambeds, routes that wouldn't hold tracks. Soren struggled to keep pace, his strength returning in fragments, but his fever remained. Whatever was wrong with him, it wasn't getting better. By midday, they'd reached the old watchtower. It had been abandoned for decades, its stones crumbling and its roof half collapsed. But the cellar beneath remained intact, hidden by overgrown brush and forgotten by the patrols that occasionally swept these hills. Vesna had discovered it during her first desperate weeks alone, had claimed it as one of several bolt holes scattered across the territory. "We'll be safe here," she said, helping Soren down the narrow stairs into darkness. "At least for a few days." The cellar was small but dry, with a fire pit vented through a crack in the foundation. Vesna had stocked it with dried meat, blankets, and candles during better times. Now she was grateful for past paranoia. Soren collapsed onto the bedding she'd arranged, his breathing labored. In the candlelight she could see how pale he'd become, how the shadows had deepened beneath his eyes. This wasn't normal recovery. Something was eating at him from within. "Let me see your wounds," she said. He didn't argue, too weak for pride. She helped him remove his tattered shirt. her fingers brushing against skin that burned like a brand. The bruises she'd partially healed had faded completely now. But there, over his heart, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Black lines. They spread from a point just below his collarbone like cracks in ice, threading outward in delicate, terrible patterns. They hadn't been there before. She was certain. "What is this?" she breathed. Soren looked down at his own chest. For a moment, surprise flickered across his face. Then it faded into something worse. Recognition. "Nightshade venom," he said quietly, mixed with something else. Something magical. "Corvus showed me the vial before they buried me. He wanted me to know what was killing me." "Poison?" Vesna's hands hovered over the dark lines, afraid to touch. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because there's no cure." His voice was flat, emptied of hope. "Nightshade venom alone would have killed me within hours. Whatever they added slowed it, made it linger. He wanted me to suffer, to feel my body failing piece by piece. But you're still alive. You're fighting it. For now." Soren met her eyes and she saw the truth there. The acceptance. "The poison feeds on something. I can feel it growing stronger sometimes, weaker other times. I haven't figured out the pattern." Vesna's mind raced. Poison that fed on something. That grew stronger or weaker depending on circumstances. She thought of everything she knew about dark magic, about curses, about the old stories her grandmother had whispered before she died. "What were you feeling?" she asked slowly. "When it grew stronger? What was happening?" Soren frowned, considering. The first surge was in the mill, when your sister came." He paused. "When I stood beside you." "And the second?" "Just now." His gaze held hers. "When I told you that you mattered." Understanding crashed over her like a winter wave. "It feeds on connection," she whispered. "On caring. The more you care for someone, the stronger it grows." Soren was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, harsh and broken. Of course. Of course that's what he chose." He pressed his palm against the black lines, as if he could push them back through sheer will. "Corvus always said I was too soft, too attached to people. He said it would destroy me someday." Another laugh, bitter as poison. Apparently he decided to make sure of it. Vesna's heart was pounding, a poison that fed on emotional bonds. That meant every moment of connection between them, every touch, and every word that mattered. She was killing him. "I should leave," she said abruptly. "Distance myself, if I'm making it worse." "No." His hand shot out, catching her wrist. The grip was weak but desperate, echoing that first moment in the grove. "Don't. Please." "Soren, I'm hurting you. Every moment I stay. Every moment you stay is a moment I'm not alone." His eyes were bright with fever and something else, something that made her chest ache. "I've been alone my entire life, Vesna. Even surrounded by court and family and servants, I've been utterly alone. My mother died when I was young. My father retreated into duty. My brother—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "My brother smiled at me for 20 years while planning to bury me alive. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just stay." His grip loosened, his thumb tracing an unconscious circle against her inner wrist. "If I'm going to die, I'd rather die feeling something than live feeling nothing." Vesna didn't pull away. Couldn't. "Your sister mentioned something," Soren said quietly. "About a night. About something you did." Vesna tensed. "It's not what she thinks. I don't care what she thinks." His eyes found hers. "I care what you tell me, when you're ready. If you're ever ready." It wasn't forgiveness for something she hadn't confessed. It was something better. It was trust. "Tell me about her," she said softly, changing the subject. "Your mother." Soren's expression shifted, grief and love tangled together. "She was kind, That's what I remember most. In a court full of politics and posturing, she was genuinely kind. She used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep. Old songs, lullabies from before the kingdoms formed. What happened to her? She died. The words came out carefully, controlled. When I was 8. An illness, they said. She wasted away over months, growing weaker and weaker until one morning she simply didn't wake. His jaw tightened. I've always wondered if it was really illness. If Corvus... He stopped himself, shaking his head. He would have been 10, Vesna said. Could a child really? You don't know my brother. Soren's voice was quiet but certain. He was never really a child. Never played, never laughed, and never seemed to want anything except what I had. Our mother preferred me. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but it was true. She tried to hide it, but Corvus knew. He always knew. Vesna thought of her own sister, of the jealousy that had curdled into hatred over years of perceived slights. And your father? She asked. My father loved my mother completely. When she died, part of him died too. He became distant, cold. He ruled justly, but without warmth. Soren's eyes found hers. Until now, I never understood why he kept everyone at arm's length. Never understood why he refused to form attachments. You think he knew? About the poison, the curse. You think he was protecting himself. I think he was protecting me. Soren's voice cracked. I think he knew that loving someone in our family meant destroying them, and he spent 20 years trying to keep me safe by keeping me alone. The weight of it settled over them both. The cure, Vesna said suddenly. There has to be one. Poisons have antidotes. Curses can be broken. Vesna. No. She pulled her hand free, standing. I didn't dig you out of that grave just to watch you die slowly. There's a solution. There's always a solution. Soren watched her pace, something like wonder in his fevered gaze. You really believe that? I have to. She stopped, facing him. Because the alternative is unacceptable. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Soren reached toward her, his fingers brushing her cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. I don't deserve you, he murmured. Probably not. But she leaned into his touch anyway, just for a moment. Just long enough to feel the connection spark between them. The black lines over his heart pulsed and spread another inch. 3 days passed in the cellar. 3 days of Vesna watching the poison creep across Soren's chest like dark frost. 3 days of rationing touches, measuring words, trying to keep him alive while knowing that every moment of comfort she offered was slowly killing him. She should have left. Every rational thought screamed at her to go, to put distance between them, to give him a chance at survival. But Soren had made her promise to stay, and something in his voice, when he asked, something raw and breaking, had stripped away her ability to refuse. So she stayed, and she searched. The watchtower's cellar held old books, journals left behind by whoever had lived here decades ago. Vesna read through them with desperate attention, searching for anything about magical poisons, about curses that fed on emotion, about cures that might exist. She found fragments, mentions of dark magic practitioners in the mountains, references to healers who could draw poison from the blood, and one passage, underlined by a hand long dead, that made her heart stop. The corruption of Nightshade, when bound with blood magic, can only be purged by one whose gift works in opposition. What is taken must be given. What is poisoned must be cleansed. The healer who absorbs must also have the strength to transform. Vesna read the passage 3 times. Her gift. Her curse. The power that had gotten her rejected, cast out, branded as dangerous. It could save him. If she took the poison into herself, absorbed it the way she absorbed wounds, she could cleanse his blood. But nightshade venom alone was lethal to anyone who ingested it. Combined with blood magic, the amount required to purge his system completely would almost certainly kill her. She looked at Soren, sleeping fitfully on the makeshift bed. The black lines had spread to his shoulders now, threading toward his throat. His breathing was labored, his fever unbreakable. He had days at most, maybe less. There's a way. Soren's eyes opened. She hadn't realized he was awake. What did you find? Vesna hesitated. She could lie, could tell him she'd found nothing, that she was still searching. He was too weak to read the journals himself. But she remembered what he'd said about trust, about his brother's betrayal, about spending 20 years surrounded by lies. My gift, she said quietly. I can absorb the poison, draw it out of you the way I draw out wounds. Hope crossed his face, quickly suppressed. What happens to you when you do? I don't know. A lie. She knew exactly what would happen, but she couldn't tell him. If he knew the cost, he would refuse to let her try. You're lying. His voice was gentle but certain. I can hear it in your heartbeat. Vesna looked away. The poison would transfer to me. I would... She stopped, gathering herself. There are risks. You would die. Not a question. A statement. Possibly. Definitely. Soren pushed himself upright, the effort clearly costing him. I know Nightshade, Vesna. I know what it does. You can't absorb it and survive. You don't know what I can survive. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. It's not your choice. The hell it isn't. He was standing now, swaying but determined. I am not worth dying for. Do you understand me? I'm the fool who trusted his brother, who never saw the knife coming, who let himself get buried alive without a fight. I'm not worth... Stop. The word came out with more force than she intended. Soren went silent, surprised. You don't get to decide your worth to me, Vesna said. You don't get to tell me that the first person who ever looked at me like I mattered doesn't deserve saving. I've spent my entire life being told I was worthless, being treated like something to be discarded. I will not let you do the same to yourself. Soren stared at her. You... He stopped, started again. When you look at me, what do you see? I see someone who defended me to my sister without knowing why. Someone who held my hand while he was dying because he didn't want me to be alone. Someone who... Her voice cracked. Someone I care about. More than I should. More than I meant to. The black lines on his chest pulsed visibly, spreading another inch. Soren looked down at them, then back at her, and the expression on his face broke something inside her. Every time I feel something for you, he said slowly, the poison grows stronger. Every moment of connection, every touch, every word that matters, it's feeding on this. On us. I know. Then you know what this means. He took a step toward her, then another. Caring about you is killing me, Vesna. Being near you is killing me. Tears burned behind her eyes. I should leave. I should have left days ago. Yes. He was close now, close enough that she could feel the fever heat radiating from his skin. That would be the smart thing, the logical thing, the thing that might keep me alive a little longer. Then let me go. I can't. His hand found her face, cupping her cheek with trembling fingers. I tried. Every night since you found me, I've tried to push you away, to build walls between us, to not feel what I'm feeling. Soren, I love you. The words fell from his lips like stones into still water. I love you, and I've known it since the moment you reached into the dirt with your bare hands and refused to let me die alone. The black lines exploded across his skin. Soren gasped, his body convulsing. His hand fell from her face as he staggered backward, clutching his chest. The poison was racing now, spreading visibly beneath his skin, threading up his neck toward his face. Vesna caught him as he fell. No, she sobbed. No, 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 hold on. Please, hold on. His eyes found hers, already glazing with pain. Worth it, he whispered, saying it. Worth it. Don't you dare die. Don't you dare. Tell me you love me. His voice was fading. Please, let me hear it once. She couldn't. The words would kill him. Every emotion they shared was another inch of poison through his veins. But he was dying anyway. He was dying, and she couldn't save him, and he deserved to know before the end. I love you, she breathed. I love you, Soren. His eyes closed. His body went still. And somewhere in the distance, Vesna heard horses approaching. Vesna's hands pressed against Soren's chest, feeling for a heartbeat. Nothing. No, she whispered. No, you don't get to leave. Not like this. She closed her eyes and reached for her gift, pulling it up from the depths of her being with desperate force. She'd always been careful before, always measured. Her father had warned her that her power could destroy her if she let it run wild. She didn't care anymore. The warmth flooded through her arms, into her palms, seeking the damage beneath Soren's skin. She felt the poison immediately, a cold, writhing darkness that recoiled from her touch. It was alive in some terrible way, sentient, and it recognized what she was trying to do. It fought back. Pain exploded through Vesna's body as the first threads of poison transferred into her veins. It was worse than anything she'd ever absorbed. Worse than broken bones or torn flesh. This was corruption itself, hatred made liquid, designed to destroy from within. But she didn't stop. She pulled more of it into herself, feeling the darkness spread through her chest, her arms, and her throat. Her vision blurred, her lungs burned. Somewhere distant she heard herself screaming, and then something shifted. The poison inside her met something else, something that had always been there, buried beneath the healing warmth. A second gift. A shadow to the light. Vesna gasped as understanding flooded through her. She could absorb wounds. She'd always known that. But she could also give them back. Transfer the damage elsewhere. Push it out of herself and into another. That was the truth her father had discovered. That was why he'd really cast her out. Not because she was a healer, because she was something far more dangerous. The memory crashed over her. That night, the night everything had changed. She'd been 14, trying to save her mother from a wasting sickness. She'd pulled the disease into herself, felt it rotting through her organs, and knew she was dying. And in her panic, in her desperate need to survive, she'd pushed it out again, into her father. He'd recovered. The sickness hadn't been fatal to his stronger constitution, but he'd felt it. He'd known what she'd done, what she was capable of doing. And he'd looked at her with such fear, such hatred, that she'd understood immediately. She was a weapon, one that could turn healing into harm with a thought, and her mother had died anyway. Despite everything Vesna had tried, despite the price she'd paid, the wasting sickness had claimed her mother 3 days later. Her father had blamed Vesna for that too, for failing to save her, for the weeks of his own suffering, for everything. Her father had bound her gift after that, limited it so she could only absorb, never transfer. He'd told everyone she was dangerous, cursed, contaminated. But the truth was simpler. He was afraid of her, afraid of what she might do to him if she ever learned to control her full power. Now, with Soren dying beneath her hands and poison coursing through her veins, the bindings on her gift shattered completely. Vesna opened her eyes. The cellar door crashed open. Torchlight flooded the darkness, illuminating figures in royal armor. And at their head, stepping down the stone stairs with cold satisfaction on his perfect features, was Prince Corvus. He looked like Soren, the same dark hair, the same sharp jaw. But where Soren's eyes held warmth beneath their grief, Corvus's held nothing at all. Empty, hollow, the eyes of something wearing a human face. Well, Corvus said softly, isn't this touching? The rejected Omega, trying to save the prince who was already dead. Vesna didn't move from Soren's side. She could feel the poison still inside her, could feel her new understanding of her gift pulsing through her veins. But she was weak. So weak. Using this power now might kill them both. He's not dead, she said. He will be. Corvus descended the final steps, his guards spreading out behind him. The poison I gave him has no cure. It feeds on love, on connection, on every soft emotion he was foolish enough to feel. By now, it should have consumed him completely. It didn't. Surprise surfaced in Corvus's hollow eyes, quickly hidden. Impossible. The dosage was precise. The magic was flawless. Your magic, Vesna said slowly, pieces clicking together in her mind, came from someone. Blood magic requires blood. Whose did you use? Corvus's smile returned, sharp and cruel. Clever little Omega, does it matter? The witch is dead now. Your father made sure of that. He was quite eager to silence her once she'd served her purpose. Couldn't have anyone knowing his bloodline carried magic, could he? The world tilted beneath Vesna, her grandmother. The stories she'd been told about her grandmother's death, the illness that had claimed her suddenly, the way her father had refused to speak of her afterward. My father killed my grandmother, Vesna breathed. For you. He killed her for himself, Corvus corrected. I merely provided the opportunity. She was one of the old blood witches, your grandmother. One who could bind poison to emotion and ensure my brother's destruction. Corvus tilted his head, studying her. She looked rather like you, actually. Same coloring, same bone structure. She created the poison to protect me. Vesna's voice shook as understanding crashed over her. She made a deal with you. Clever girl. Yes, she was reluctant at first, had moral objections. But everyone has leverage, and hers was a granddaughter she'd been watching from afar. A gifted girl who'd been cruelly rejected. His smile widened. She created the poison in exchange for my promise to leave you alone, and your father killed her before she could warn anyone about what we'd done. You're a monster. I'm a king. Corvus shrugged. Or I will be, once we've finished cleaning up loose ends. Vesna's hands were shaking. Rage and grief tangled together in her chest, threatening to overwhelm her. Her grandmother had died for her, had created this nightmare trying to protect her, and her own father had murdered her to keep his secrets. There's always a way to break a curse, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Every poison has an antidote. Not this one. Corvus stepped closer, confident now. The magic was bound to blood, the witch's blood. Since she's dead. Her bloodline isn't. Corvus stopped. Vesna rose to her feet, the poison still writhing inside her, her grandmother's blood singing in her veins. She understood now. Understood why she could feel the darkness so clearly, why it responded to her touch in ways it shouldn't. The curse was tied to her bloodline, and she had the power to unmake it. You made a mistake, she said quietly. You killed the witch, but you left her heir alive. You cast me out, rejected me, and ensured I had nothing left to lose. She stepped toward him, and something in her expression made his guards reach for their swords. And then, you buried the only person in this kingdom who ever looked at me like I mattered. Seize her, Corvus commanded. The guards moved forward. Vesna didn't flinch. She reached inside herself, found the writhing poison in her veins, and pushed. The darkness exploded outward. It hit the first guard like a physical blow, dropping him instantly. The second fell a moment later, then the third. The poison she'd absorbed from Soren, the corruption that had been killing him. She channeled it out of herself and into everyone who stood between her and Corvus. They weren't dead, just paralyzed, feeling what Soren had felt as they buried him alive. Corvus stumbled backward, his empty eyes finally showing something real. Fear. What are you? He gasped. I'm my grandmother's heir. Vesna advanced on him, power still crackling through her veins. And I'm going to end what she started. She reached for him. And behind her, Soren drew a ragged breath and opened his eyes. The sound of Soren's breathing stopped Vesna mid-stride. She turned, her heart slamming against her ribs, and saw him struggling to sit up. The black lines on his chest had faded to gray. Still present, still visible, but no longer spreading. No longer killing him. Vesna, he rasped. Don't. She didn't understand. She had Corvus cornered. She had the power to end him, to transfer every drop of poison into his veins, to make him suffer what he'd inflicted on his brother. He deserves it, she said. Maybe. Soren's eyes found hers, still glazed with pain but clearer than they'd been in days. But you don't deserve to become a killer. Not for me. Not for anyone. He murdered your mother. He tried to murder you. He killed my grandmother. And if you kill him, you become what he is. Soren pushed himself to his feet, swaying but determined. You become someone who solves problems with death. Someone who poisons instead of heals. I'm not. You're a healer, Vesna. That's what you are at your core. Everything else is just a shadow of that gift. He took a step toward her, then another. Don't let him take that from you. Don't let him make you into something you're not. Corvus was watching this exchange with calculating eyes, already recovering from his fear, already looking for weakness to exploit. How touching, he sneered, the dying prince and his Omega savior. Do you really think this changes anything? Even if you let me live, I'll return to the palace. I'll tell our father that Soren attacked me, that he's lost his mind, that he needs to be put down for the safety of the kingdom. Will you? A new voice spoke from the cellar entrance. Everyone turned. Alpha King Kalen stood at the top of the stairs, his presence filling the space like a physical force. He was older than Vesna had imagined, his dark hair threaded with gray, his face lined with grief. But his eyes were sharp and clear and absolutely furious. Beside him stood Cressida. Vesna's sister looked different, smaller somehow, uncertain in a way she'd never been before, and behind her, bound in chains, was Vesna's father. Father, Soren breathed. I received an interesting visitor this morning, the Alpha King said, descending the stairs with slow, deliberate steps. A young woman who claimed to have information about my son's death, information about who was really responsible. Cressida stepped forward, her voice shaking. I saw them. The night they took Prince Soren, I saw Corvus give the orders. I saw everything, but I was too afraid to speak. Lies, Corvus spat. She's a rejected Omega's sister. Her word means nothing. Her word is corroborated. The Alpha King's voice could have frozen fire. By your own men, who were remarkably forthcoming once they understood the consequences of silence. By the servants who saw you preparing the paralytic. By the stable hands who saddled horses in the middle of the night. Corvus's face went white. And by your father, the king continued, turning to Vesna, who confessed everything when confronted with the evidence, including how he bound his own daughter's gift to prevent her from becoming too powerful, including how he cast her out to hide his family's connection to blood magic. Vesna stared at her father, at the man who had destroyed her life to protect his own secrets. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He also confirmed, the king added quietly, that your grandmother was the witch my son commissioned, the one who created the poison that was killing Soren. She tried to refuse, tried to warn us. Your father silenced her before she could. The words hit Vesna like physical blows. Her father hadn't just cast her out. He'd killed her grandmother. He'd kept her silent. He'd allowed Corvus's plan to proceed, because exposing it would have exposed his own family's blood magic heritage. I had no choice, her father said, his voice thin and desperate. If anyone knew what we were, what our bloodline carried, You let an innocent man die, Vesna said flatly. You would have let the prince die. You destroyed my life, my mother's life, my grandmother's life, all to protect yourself. I protected the family name. You protected nothing. Vesna turned away from him, unable to look at his face any longer. The Alpha King nodded to his guards. Take them both. Corvus will face trial for attempted murder of the Crown Prince. Alistair Crane will face trial for conspiracy and the murder of Marisol Crane, his own mother. As the guards moved forward, Corvus made one last desperate lunge toward Vesna. Perhaps he thought he could use her as a hostage. Perhaps he simply wanted to hurt someone before the end. He never reached her. Soren moved faster than anyone expected, intercepting his brother with strength that shouldn't have been possible. They crashed to the ground together, and when they rose, it was Soren who held Corvus pinned, his forearm against his brother's throat. I loved you, Soren said quietly. Despite everything, I loved you, and you buried me alive. You were always the favorite, Corvus choked out. Always the golden prince. Father never looked at me the way he looked at you. So you decided to destroy me instead of earning his love yourself. Soren's voice was heavy with grief. You wasted your entire life hating me for something I never chose. He released his brother, stepping back as the guards took hold of Corvus's arms. Take him away, the Alpha King commanded. I can't look at him anymore. As Corvus was dragged up the stairs, he screamed threats and curses, promises of revenge that echoed off the stone walls. No one listened. No one cared. When the cellar finally fell silent, Soren turned to Vesna. You saved me, he said simply. You stopped me from becoming a murderer. She managed a weak smile. I think we're even. Not even close. He crossed the distance between them, his hands finding her face, tilting it up toward his. You dug me out of my grave with your bare hands. You took poison into your own body to cleanse mine. You faced down my brother with nothing but your gift and your courage. Soren, I love you. He said it clearly, deliberately, without hesitation. And I don't care if saying it kills me. I won't spend another moment pretending otherwise. Vesna's eyes went to his chest, waiting for the black lines to spread. They didn't. The curse was broken. Her grandmother's blood magic, channeled through her own gift, had unraveled it completely. The poison that fed on love had been purged, and what remained was just them. Just two broken wolves who had somehow found each other in the darkness. I love you too, she whispered. Soren kissed her. It was everything a first kiss should be and nothing like she'd imagined. Gentle and fierce, desperate and patient, the beginning of something that neither of them had dared to hope for. When they finally broke apart, the Alpha King was watching them with an expression that might have been a smile. I believe, he said slowly, that I have a throne to restore to its rightful heir, and a new member to welcome into the royal family. Vesna blinked. Your Majesty, I'm a rejected Omega. I have no status, no bloodline worth mentioning. You have the bloodline of the woman who tried to save my son's life, the king interrupted. You have the gift that broke the curse my youngest son created. And you have the love of my heir. His eyes softened. That is more than enough. Cressida stepped forward hesitantly. Vesna, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I knew Father was wrong about you. I always knew. But I was afraid and jealous and... We'll talk, Vesna said. Later, when all of this has settled. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a door left open, a possibility of healing that hadn't existed before. 6 months later, Vesna stood in the great hall of Valdoria, wearing a gown of silver and white that made her feel like someone else entirely. Soren stood beside her, healthy and whole, the crown prince restored to his rightful place. The black lines on his chest had faded to nothing. The only mark that remained was the thin scar over his heart, a reminder of how close they'd both come to losing everything. Ready? he murmured. No. Vesna smiled despite her nerves. But I don't think anyone's ever ready for this. The priest began the bonding ceremony, his voice echoing through the hall packed with nobles and commoners alike. Vesna barely heard the words. She was too busy watching Soren's face, seeing the joy there, the love that no longer had to hide. When the time came for their vows, Soren took her hands in his. I was dead when you found me, he said quietly. Not just buried, but dead inside. Empty. I'd spent my whole life keeping everyone at a distance because I was afraid of what caring might cost. And then you reached into the dirt with your bare hands and refused to let me stay buried. Tears burned behind Vesna's eyes. You saw me when no one else would look. You stayed when everyone else would have run. You loved me when loving me was literally killing you. His voice cracked. I don't have the words for what you mean to me. I don't think the words exist. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to find them. When it was her turn, Vesna's voice was steadier than she expected. I was rejected, she said, cast out, told that I was worthless, dangerous, better off forgotten. I believed it for so long that I forgot what it felt like to matter to anyone. She squeezed his hands. And then you looked at me like I was the most important person in your world. You trusted me with your life, with your secrets, with your heart. You saw the parts of me I'd been taught to hate and loved them anyway. Soren's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you, Vesna said. I love you, and I'm not afraid to say it anymore. I'm not afraid of what it might cost. Because you taught me that some things are worth any price. The priest pronounced them bonded. Soren kissed her. The hall erupted in cheers. But as they walked out together, hands intertwined, Vesna caught sight of two figures at the edge of the crowd. Cressida, watching with an expression that was almost pride. And beside her, a young woman with Vesna's own coloring and their grandmother's sharp eyes. A cousin she'd never known existed, discovered during the investigation into their family's blood magic heritage. The bloodline continued. The gift would pass on to new generations, and this time, it would be nurtured instead of feared. Soren leaned close as they stepped into the sunlight. What are you thinking? Vesna smiled at him, at this man who had changed everything, who had been buried in darkness and emerged into light. I'm thinking, she said, that they tried to bury us both, and look what grew instead. Soren laughed, pulling her close. They'd been rejected, cast out, left for dead. But they'd found each other in the darkness. They'd clawed their way back to the surface with bare hands and stubborn hearts. And now they stood in the light together, proof that even the most broken things could become something beautiful. The kingdom celebrated for 3 days, and in the years that followed, they would tell stories about the Omega who saved the prince, about the healer who broke an unbreakable curse, about the love that refused to stay buried. But Vesna knew the truth was simpler than any story. She had reached into the dirt because she couldn't bear to let someone die alone, and in saving him, she had finally saved herself. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments. I always read them, and they mean more than you know.